Bill Worthington Audition for Apocalypse Drift by Joe Nobody. Prologue, Virginia Countryside, November 2016. The vast majority of leaves had fallen early this year, covering the forest floor with uneven ripples of burnt orange and soiled brown. Bare limbs and branches exposed the Virginia sky, now a bleached cobalt gray, peppered with low-rolling clouds, formations that a vivid imagination might paint as the ribs of some giant heavenly beast. The steely sky and hibernating forest outside closely mimicked the uninviting atmosphere inside the van. Colorless, cold, and practically devoid of sound, two men sat in silence, keeping vigil. The minivan was about as dirt plain and common as it could be. Other than the darker-than-usual tint on the side panels of glass, there was nothing significant or noteworthy about the vehicle. It was like millions of such cars driven every day by families all across America. Even the color had been carefully selected. Paint that appeared gold or perhaps brown, maybe even tan in different light. The nondescript transport would be difficult for any witness to describe, let alone pinpoint an identifying characteristic. Of Asian descent, the Sentinels were in their mid-20s and in excellent physical condition. Both wore custom-tailored suit jackets, complete with hand-sewn pleats to accommodate the holstered pistols beneath. Each man wore tight calfskin gloves that hadn't been removed since leaving their hotel room that morning. This was a precaution born purely of habit, since neither man's fingerprints were stored in any database, foreign or domestic. Both wanted to keep it that way, and besides, the gloves provided minimal warmth against the colder-than-normal November dusk. The tone of a cell phone disturbed the calm. The prepaid, featureless unit had been purchased at a drugstore less than 3 hours ago with cash. The driver glanced at the device and pressed the green button, immediately moving the speaker to his ear. 5 minutes, a male voice said in Mandarin. The driver hit the red button, ending the call, and then nodded at his passenger. Precisely 4 minutes later, the van started. Making sure the headlights were switched off, the driver pulled the shift lever and slowly rolled down the abandoned gravel lane where they were lurking. A short distance in front of them laid the crest of a rise. 400 meters further and down a gradual slope, a blacktop country road wound its way through the remote countryside. The driver stopped the van just as the pavement came into view. Right on time, the roadway below was illuminated by the glow of headlights, soon followed by a passing white Honda sedan. A few seconds later, the van pulled onto the asphalt, allowing for a suitable expanse of time and distance. Hugging the shadows, the van tailed the white car. The operators knew exactly where the vehicle was going, who was driving, and why it was heading to the remote farmhouse. In fact, they knew practically everything about the young lady who steered the compact car through the rural countryside. Their purpose tonight was to add one remaining piece of critical information to her extensive dossier. Susan Wilkes zipped around the curves a little faster than normal. The traffic from Fairfax had been atrocious, and she detested arriving at the farm after the sun set. Lee would join her later, having the longer journey from Alexandria. The thought of Lee's inevitable grumbling about traffic gridlock actually put a smile on her lips. When she reached the country house, she would heat water and set out the makings for tea. A steaming cup of ginseng brew would serve to mellow both of them after the hectic work week and stressful commute to escape the city. The 20-something computer specialist could barely believe her luck. She felt a sense of optimism that Lee might be Mr. Right. Until recently, Susie's dates had been with Mr. Right now. Maneuvering through the next curve, she recalled the first time Lee invited her to this retreat. Even though they had been dating for several weeks, she was cautious in accepting his offer. She couldn't help but hope that ultimately Lee and she would share a more permanent commitment. Was it too early for the two of them to spend a romantic weekend alone? Initially, she'd considered it odd that such a metropolitan guy needed to get away from it all and enjoy the fresh air of the countryside. It seemed unusual that such an experienced, well-traveled representative of a major Chinese trade organization would choose a rural property for a weekend sanctuary. His confessed love of horses was the clincher, the shy admission being both boyish and romantic. Growing up, Susie had always been fascinated by all things equestrian. Now she'd found someone who rekindled those childhood dreams. The wistful expression on her face betrayed her realization. A guy like that doesn't come along every day. Susie hoped that a relationship based on their shared interests would overcome Lee's traditional expectations of her. She understood Lee's perspective was based on the incongruence between her progressive spirit and her physical appearance. "You're a paradox," he once told her. "You look and move like the most beautiful Chinese girl I've ever seen, yet you act, think, and speak like an American." "I'm an American," she had responded in her best country accent. 100% born and bred. If you're looking for one of those subservient Asian girls, you're barking up the wrong tree, cowboy. Susie's mother escaped China as a teenage girl in 1989. Her grandparents were political dissidents, and the Catholic Church had smuggled the family out of the country. A short time later, the United States granted asylum to the refugees. Susie's father was an American who met and fell in love with her mother in a college freshman English course. The two waited until after graduation to exchange vows, their first child debuting about a year later. With almond-shaped mocha eyes and silky dark tresses, there was no doubt of Susan Lee Wilkes' ancestry. Her mother's contribution to the gene pool dominated the girl's physical features, her slight build and creamy skin indicative of generations of striking Oriental women. Her father wasn't completely left out of her DNA sequence, Sue's strong-willed streak of independence being attributed to his influence. Growing up in the suburbs of the nation's capital, Susie populated her slight expanse of urban sprawl with 3 rescued pups, a tabby cat, and 2 hamsters. Remembering an elementary school field trip to a working farm, she could still picture the beautiful horses that were the highlight of the outing. Then there had been Marion, a college roommate whose family owned a stable. Sue smiled broadly, thinking about that summer spent riding and caring for the steeds. It had been hard, sweaty work, but she had loved every minute of it. A stop sign made her focus on the here and now. After passing through the intersection, she wondered why she had ignored the interest since. Life, she said to herself. Life came rolling along and didn't leave time. Graduation, career, no time left to think about horses. A short distance from the farm, Susie's mind drifted to an oft-visited subject, the possibility of a long-term future with Lee. Strikingly handsome, business-savvy, and generous to a fault, he liked to surprise her with little gifts for no apparent reason. Never before had she met a man with whom she had so much in common. Susie had been waiting for a table at her favorite restaurant when Lee struck up a conversation with her. Turned out he was a fan of Nouvelle cuisine, too. Sue was learning ink and wash landscape painting. A collection of the same artistic genre graced the walls of Lee's apartment. "I never thought I would find someone who shared so many of my interests," she whispered to herself. "Maybe this is a sign that we are destined to be together." Before she could finish the thought, the brown and green mailbox announcing the farm's driveway came into the distant glow of the headlights.